Jaguar cub chases veterinarian for hours, until she understands and breaks down in tears. Dr. Samantha Miller had never seen anything like it in her 10 years working at the Yellowstone Wildlife Reserve in Bozeman. The Jaguar cub had been following her for over 3 hours, always keeping the same 2-meter distance, as if trying to tell her something urgent. The 32-year-old veterinarian stopped once more on the dirt road cutting through the reserve, wiping the sweat from her forehead with the back of her glove. The midday sun beat down mercilessly, and her navy blue uniform shirt from the Environmental Guard was already soaked. She turned again to observe the small, spotted feline that had been accompanying her since early morning. "Go away, little one," Samantha whispered, slowly crouching down. "You should be with your mother, not following me." The cub, no more than 3 months old, remained seated on its hind legs, simply watching her with those piercing golden eyes. Its black spots contrasted perfectly with its golden fur, and Samantha could see it was well-fed and healthy. That puzzled her even more. Since she'd arrived that morning for her routine patrol, the animal had appeared out of nowhere and started trailing her. Samantha had tried several times to shoo it away, clapping her hands, making noises, even tossing small twigs in the opposite direction. Nothing worked. The cub would simply wait for her to stop making noise and then continue following her. "Samantha, are you listening?" The voice crackled over the radio clipped to her belt. She stood and grabbed the device. It was Michael, her colleague from the central base. "I'm here, Michael. Go ahead. I need you back urgently. We've got a situation with the State Environmental Protection Agency inspectors. They showed up unannounced and want to review all our records." Samantha looked at the cub, which remained motionless, as if waiting for her decision. "Michael, I've got a problem here. A Jaguar cub has been following me for hours, and I don't know what to do." "Following you how?" "Literally following me. Wherever I go, it follows, keeps its distance, but won't leave me alone." There was a pause on the line. "Samantha, you need to come back now. The inspectors are tearing through everything and questioning our documentation on the animals rescued last month. If they find any irregularities..." "I know, Michael, but I can't just abandon this cub here. Is its mother nearby?" Samantha scanned the area. The sparse vegetation of the savannah stretched for miles, dotted with a few larger trees and shrubs. There was no sign of an adult jaguar. "I don't see any adults around, and that's really strange. Cubs this age don't stay alone. Maybe the mother's hunting and will be back soon. You can't stand there all day." Samantha knew Michael was right, but something about the cub's behavior unsettled her deeply. In all her years of experience, she'd never seen a wild animal act this way. It was as if the cub was trying to communicate something specific. "I'll try bringing it back to the base with me," Samantha decided. "Maybe we can scan for a microchip and figure out where it came from." "Samantha, you know we can't interfere with nature without authorization. If the inspectors find out we brought in a cub without documentation, and if we leave it here and something happens, how do we explain that?" Michael sighed over the radio. "Fine, bring it, but be careful, and hurry." Samantha clipped the radio back to her belt and cautiously approached the cub. To her surprise, when she took a few steps toward the jeep parked 50 meters away, the animal immediately stood and followed her. "Unbelievable," she murmured. When they reached the vehicle, Samantha opened the back door and gestured for the cub to climb in. He hesitated for a few seconds, sniffed the air, then nimbly jumped into the jeep. During the drive back to the base, Samantha watched the cub in the rearview mirror. It was restless, moving back and forth on the back seat, as if anxious to reach a specific place. The Yellowstone Wildlife Reserve base was a cluster of simple white-painted masonry buildings surrounded by a large grassy area with enclosures for animals in recovery. Samantha parked near the main building and got out of the jeep. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now back to the story. The cub jumped out of the vehicle and immediately began sniffing the ground intensely, moving in ever-widening circles. Samantha watched, fascinated by its behavior. "Samantha!" Michael appeared at the building's door, waving urgently. "The inspectors want to talk to you now." She looked at the cub, which had stopped sniffing and was staring at her again with those piercing eyes. Stay here, little one. I'll be right back. Samantha entered the building and headed to the meeting room, where three middle-aged men in dark suits and serious expressions sat around a table covered in scattered papers. "Dr. Samantha Miller?" asked the tallest of them, a bald man with gold-framed glasses. "That's me. I'm Inspector Richard Thompson from the State Environmental Protection Agency. We need you to clarify some inconsistencies in the records of rescued animals." Samantha felt her stomach tighten. Michael watched her nervously from the corner of the room. "What kind of inconsistencies?" "According to our records, you logged the rescue of a female jaguar on the 15th of last month, but there's no record of its release or transfer. Where is it?" Samantha and Michael exchanged quick glances. They remembered the case well. The jaguar had been rescued after being hit by a car on the road, but had escaped from the recovery enclosure 3 days later. They had searched for it for an entire week with no luck. Technically, they should have reported the incident to the authorities, but Michael had suggested waiting to see if they could locate it. Samantha began, but was interrupted by noises outside. Loud, insistent yowls echoed across the yard. The cub was yowling in a way Samantha had never heard before, an almost desperate sound. "Excuse me," she said, standing quickly. "Doctor, we haven't finished our conversation," protested the inspector. "It's an animal emergency. I'll be right back." Samantha rushed outside and found the cub in the middle of the yard, yowling toward the back enclosures. When it saw her, it ran a few yards in that direction, stopped, looked back to make sure she was following, and continued. "It wants to show me something," Samantha murmured, following the animal. The cub led her to enclosure number 5, which had been empty for weeks. It was one of the largest, nearly 200 square yards, usually used for recovering big cats. The cub stopped in front of the gate and began scratching the ground with its front paws. Samantha moved closer and examined the spot. The dirt was disturbed in several places, as if someone had dug there recently. She knelt and ran her hand over the loose soil. "What are you trying to show me, little one?" The cub yowled again and began digging more intensely at a specific spot. Samantha hesitated for a few seconds, then decided to help. Using her hands, she started digging in the same spot. After a few minutes, her fingers touched something solid, metal. Samantha dug a little deeper and uncovered an animal identification tag, the kind used to track jaguars during scientific research. "My God," she whispered, wiping the tag on her blouse. The number engraved on it was YLW047. Samantha recognized that code. It belonged to the jaguar that had escaped from the enclosure the previous month, the female the inspectors had been searching for. Samantha looked at the cub, who had stopped digging and was watching her intently. "She was your mother, wasn't she?" she asked softly. As if understanding the question, the cub approached and nuzzled her leg, a behavior Samantha had never seen in such a young wild feline. "Samantha!" Michael's voice echoed across the yard. "The inspectors are getting impatient." She tucked the tag into her pocket and stood up, her heart racing. The discovery raised far more questions than answers. Why was the jaguar's identification tag buried in the enclosure? And how did the cub know exactly where to look? "I need to go back inside," she told the cub, "but I won't leave you alone." Samantha picked up the cub, surprised by its docility, and returned to the main building. She placed it in a temporary carrier in the equipment room before rejoining the meeting. "Sorry for the delay," she said as she entered the room. "Dr. Miller," Inspector Richard Thompson stared at her sternly. "You still haven't answered my question. Where is Jaguar YLW047? Samantha felt the tag burning in her pocket. She knew withholding information from the inspectors could result in the reserve's closure and serious legal trouble for her and Michael. But she also knew she still didn't fully understand what had happened. "Mr. Thompson," she took a deep breath, "can I be completely honest with you?" "That's exactly what we expect. The jaguar escaped from the recovery enclosure 3 days after the rescue. We searched for 2 weeks but couldn't locate her. We should have reported it immediately, and I take full responsibility for that." The inspector made a few notes on his pad. "And why didn't you report it?" Michael shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Because we believed we'd find her quickly," Samantha replied. "It was a lapse in judgment on my part." "Doctor," Do you understand the severity of this? An injured jaguar loose in the area could pose a danger to the local community. Not to mention, it's our duty to monitor every animal under care. I understand completely, sir. We'll have to issue a fine and begin an administrative review. Depending on the investigation's outcome, the reserve's operating license may be suspended. Samantha felt her world crumbling. The reserve was her entire life. She had given up marriage, family, everything to dedicate herself to this work. The thought of losing it all over a procedural mistake was unbearable. "Please," she said, struggling to keep her voice steady. "Give me a few more days to try to locate the Jaguar. Maybe we can still resolve this." "I'm sorry, but that's no longer possible. The situation escalated when you chose not to report the incident." Just then, the cub's cries echoed through the building, louder and more desperate than before. "What's that animal?" one of the inspectors asked. "A jaguar cub I found today," Samantha answered automatically. "Found where? Do you have rescue documentation?" Samantha realized she'd made another mistake. Without proper documentation, bringing the cub into the facility could also be considered a violation. "It was following me on the road. I couldn't leave it out there alone." "Dr. Miller," Inspector Richard Thompson stood up. "You're racking up violations. I'll need to see that cub immediately." Samantha led them to the equipment room, where the cub was restless inside the transport crate. When he saw Samantha, he began meowing even louder, as if pleading for help. "This animal needs to be transferred immediately to a specialized center," declared the inspector. "You don't have authorization to keep him here." "But he's too young. The trip could be dangerous." "That's no longer your responsibility. We'll contact the Denver Zoo. They have the proper facilities for orphaned cubs." Samantha felt tears welling in her eyes. In just a few hours, her life had become a nightmare. The reserve would be shut down, she'd lose her job, and now the cub would be taken away. "Please," she begged, "just give me until tomorrow. I need to examine him properly, check if he has any health issues." The inspector hesitated. "Fine. You have until 8 a.m. tomorrow. After that, the animal will be transferred, and you'll receive the official notice suspending operations." Once the inspectors left, Samantha sat on the floor beside the crate, defeated. Michael approached and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Samantha, I'm so sorry. I know you did what you thought was best. Michael, it's not just about my job. Something very strange is happening here. The cub led me straight to where the mother jaguar's tag was buried. How did he know? Maybe it was a coincidence." It wasn't. He dug exactly in the right spot. And look how he behaves with me. Wild cubs don't act like this. Michael studied the animal in the crate. "What are you suggesting?" "I don't know. But I need to find out what happened to his mother. Maybe that'll explain why he was seeking me out." "Samantha, you have less than 20 hours before you lose everything. Shouldn't you focus on trying to fix things with the inspectors?" Samantha shook her head. "No. Something tells me the answer lies with this cub. If I can figure out what happened to his mother, maybe I can prove we did everything right." She opened the crate and lifted the cub into her arms again. He immediately settled, nuzzling against her chest. "You're going to help me find the truth, aren't you, little one?" In response, the cub began purring softly, a sound that touched Samantha's heart deeply. "Michael, I'm staying here at the reserve tonight. I want to observe his behavior and try to understand what's going on. Do you want me to stay too?" "No, thank you. I need to be alone with him to see how he reacts." After Michael left, Samantha made a makeshift bed in the equipment room and lay down with the cub beside her. To her surprise, he curled up against her and quickly fell asleep. Samantha, however, couldn't close her eyes. Her mind raced, trying to piece together the puzzle. Jaguar YLW047 had been rescued injured on the road. She was about 8 years old, still of breeding age. The injury wasn't severe, just some scrapes on her paws. She'd recovered well in the first few days. Samantha remembered clearly the night the Jaguar had escaped. She'd been on duty and had gone to check on the animals around 2 a.m. The enclosure gate was open and there was no sign of the Jaguar. At the time, they'd assumed someone had forgotten to secure the latch properly, but now with the buried tag, Samantha began to suspect the escape hadn't been an accident. Around 3 a.m., the cub woke up and started fidgeting. Samantha turned on the light and watched him. He was sniffing the air intently, as if he'd caught a specific scent. "What is it, little one?" The cub jumped from her lap and went to the door, scratching the wood and mewing softly. "You want to go out?" Samantha opened the door and the cub darted toward the yard. She followed, using only her phone's flashlight to light the way. The cub stopped near fence number 3 and began sniffing the ground again. It was a smaller enclosure, usually meant for medium-sized animals. It had been empty for at least 2 months. "Are you sniffing something specific?" Samantha knelt and examined the ground with the flashlight. There were strange marks in the dirt, as if something heavy had been dragged through. The cub led her to a small shed at the back of the reserve, used for storing old equipment. It was a place Samantha rarely visited, as most of the items there were long out of use. The cub stopped in front of the shed door and began scratching the wood intensely. "Is there something in there?" Samantha tested the doorknob. It was locked, but she knew where Michael kept the spare keys. After a few minutes, she managed to open the door. The smell that wafted out was strong and unpleasant. Samantha shone the flashlight inside and nearly gasped in shock. At the back of the small shed lay an adult mountain lion, stretched out on some old rags. It was motionless, but Samantha could see it was still breathing, though with difficulty. "My God," she whispered, stepping in cautiously. It was a female, with the size and features Samantha remembered from mountain lion YLW-047. She was visibly weak, thin, and had old wounds on her paws that looked infected. The cub rushed in behind Samantha and went straight to the adult, licking her muzzle affectionately. "It's your mother," Samantha murmured, tears in her eyes. "You were trying to bring me to her all along." The mountain lion slowly opened her eyes and looked at Samantha. There was no aggression in her gaze, only deep exhaustion. "How did you end up here?" Samantha asked, though she knew she'd never get an answer. She quickly examined the animal with the flashlight. The mountain lion was severely dehydrated and malnourished. The wounds on her paws were infected, likely preventing her from hunting properly. Samantha guessed she'd been in this state for at least 2 weeks. "I need to take care of you right now," she said, rushing out to grab medical supplies. Samantha worked through the night, administering fluids, antibiotics, and dressing the mountain lion's wounds. The animal let herself be treated gently, as if she knew Samantha was trying to help. The cub stayed by its mother's side the whole time, like a little guardian. When the sun began to rise, Samantha finally allowed herself a moment to rest. She sat on the shed floor, watching mother and cub together. "How did you two end up here?" she asked again, more to herself than expecting an answer. That's when she noticed something she'd missed in the dark. In the corner of the shed were some tools and a shovel with dirt still caked on it. Samantha stood and examined the shovel more closely. The dirt was the same type she'd found in the enclosure, where the ID plate had been buried. "Someone brought you here," she said, starting to piece it together. "Someone hid you here and buried the plate so no one would find out. But who would do such a thing, and why?" Samantha heard the sound of a car approaching. Through the shed's small window, she saw it was Michael arriving for another workday. She hurried out to meet him in the parking lot. "Michael!" she called, waving. "Samantha, did you really stay here all night?" "Michael, I need you to come with me. I found the mountain lion." "What do you mean you found her?" "The cub led me to her. She's alive, but in terrible shape." Michael followed her to the shed, and his reaction upon seeing the mountain lion was utter shock. "How did she end up here?" "That's what I need to find out." "Michael, someone hid her here on purpose, and whoever did it has access to our facilities. You're suggesting someone on the team is involved?" "I don't know, but look." Samantha showed the shovel covered in dirt. "Someone buried her enclosure tag and brought her here. Why would anyone do that?" Michael examined the shovel and shook his head, confused. "Samantha, this doesn't make sense. Who would hide an injured Jaguar instead of caring for her properly? Someone who didn't want her found. The question is, why?" At that moment, they heard voices outside. It was Inspector Richard Thompson, who had returned as promised. "Dr. Miller," he called from the yard, "I've come for the cub." Samantha looked at Michael in panic. What do I do? If he finds the Jaguar here, it'll be even worse for us. Samantha, you need to tell the truth. Hiding it will only make things worse. But I still don't understand what happened. I need more time. You don't have more time. Samantha looked at the Jaguar and her cub. The female was sleeping, finally stable after the overnight care. The cub watched her with those golden eyes, as if pleading not to be separated. I can't let them take the cub, she said. Not while his mother is in this condition. Dr. Miller, the inspector's voice grew closer. Michael, give me a few more minutes. Distract the inspector while I figure something out. Michael hesitated but finally agreed. All right, but be quick. After Michael left, Samantha knelt beside the Jaguar and her cub. I need to find out who did this to you, she whispered, and I need proof. She searched the storage area more carefully, looking for any clue that could explain how the animals got there. That's when she noticed something glinting under a pile of old rags. It was a key. Samantha picked it up and saw a label stuck to it. Enclosure 5, Reserve. Whoever did this used our own key, she murmured. This meant the person who hid the Jaguar definitely had authorized access to the facilities, but why would someone on the team do such a thing? Samantha heard footsteps approaching the storage area. Quickly, she tucked the key into her pocket and stepped out to intercept whoever was coming. It was Jim, the employee responsible for maintaining the enclosures. He'd worked at the reserve for over 5 years and was always considered very dedicated. Ms. Miller, he said, seeming surprised to see her. You've been here since early. Jim, have you noticed anything strange around here in the last few weeks? Strange how? I don't know. People in the enclosures after hours, equipment out of place, anything unusual? Jim averted his gaze, looking uncomfortable. Not that I recall, no. Samantha studied his body language. Jim was nervous, fidgeting with his hands and avoiding eye contact. Jim, do you recognize this key? She asked, showing him the one she'd found. His face paled instantly. I don't know where that came from. Jim, I found Jaguar YLW047. She's alive, but hidden in storage. Do you know anything about this? Jim glanced around nervously, as if making sure no one else was listening. Ms. Miller, I didn't want this to happen. What didn't you want to happen? I didn't know the Jaguar was sick. I thought she was fine. Jim, tell me everything. What did you do? He took a deep breath and lowered his head. It was Mr. Jenkins who asked me. He said he needed the Jaguar for something important, but only for a few days. Samantha's stomach turned cold. Jenkins owned a ranch neighboring the reserve, known for constant conflicts with local environmentalists. What kind of important thing? He didn't tell me. He just said he'd pay really well and that no one would get hurt. Told me he'd return the Jaguar to the reserve himself later. And you believed him? Mrs. Miller, my daughter is sick. She needs an expensive surgery and Medicare can't schedule it. Mr. Jenkins offered me enough money to cover everything. Samantha understood the situation. Jim was a simple man with few resources, placed in an impossible position between saving his daughter and doing his job. What exactly did you do, Jim? The night the Jaguar supposedly escaped, I opened the enclosure and took her to the storage shed. Mr. Jenkins came to pick her up the next day, but 2 days later, he brought her back, saying it hadn't worked out and that I needed to hide her until he figured out what to do. And you didn't question why she was injured? I did. He said she got hurt trying to escape, told me he'd take her to a private vet later. Samantha felt anger and compassion at the same time. Jim had made a serious mistake, but his reasons were understandable. Jim, where is Mr. Jenkins now? I don't know. He stopped answering my calls a week ago, left the Jaguar here and disappeared. And why didn't you ask for help? Because I was afraid of losing my job and not getting the money for my daughter. I thought the Jaguar would recover on her own. Just then, Michael came running up. Samantha, the inspector is losing patience. He wants to see the cub now. Samantha looked at Jim. Will you help me fix this? I'll do whatever you say, Mrs. Miller. Then come with me. We'll tell the inspector the truth together. The three of them walked over to where Inspector Richard Thompson waited, visibly annoyed. Dr. Miller, I've been here 15 minutes. Where's the cub? Mr. Thompson, I need to show you something very important. I found Jaguar YLW047. The inspector raised his eyebrows. What do you mean, found? She was hidden in our own facility. Someone put her there after taking her from the recovery enclosure. That's a serious accusation. Do you have proof? Samantha glanced at Jim, who nodded nervously. I have the person who can explain everything. Over the next hour, Jim told the inspector the whole story, taking full responsibility for his actions. Samantha added the evidence she'd found: the key, the dirt-covered shovel, the buried sign. Inspector Richard Thompson listened quietly, taking notes the whole time. Mr. Jim, he finally said, you understand you've committed a crime against wildlife? I do, sir. I'm ready to face the consequences. And can you prove Mr. Jenkins asked you to do this? I have his texts asking me to move the Jaguar, and the money he gave me. Jim showed his phone with the messages and the cash he'd kept at home. This changes everything, the inspector said. Dr. Miller and Michael had no idea this happened, correct? Correct. They didn't know anything. Samantha felt immense relief, but she knew the situation was far from resolved. What about Mr. Jenkins? The inspector asked. I need to find him, Samantha said. I have some ideas where he might be. Very well, Dr. Miller. Given the circumstances, I'll temporarily suspend penalties against the reserve, but I need your help locating this man, and the Jaguar must be properly cared for. You can count on me, Samantha replied. And the cub? Samantha looked at the cub, who had stayed quiet the whole time, as if knowing its fate was being decided. He needs to stay with his mother while she recovers. Separating them now would harm both. The inspector hesitated. All right, but I want daily reports on the condition of both animals. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing, after the inspector left, Samantha could finally focus entirely on caring for the Jaguar. With Michael and Jim's help, they set up a makeshift infirmary in the storage room, bringing in proper medical equipment. The Jaguar was responding well to antibiotics, but would still need intensive care for at least a week. The cub never left her side, like a little furry nurse. Samantha, Michael said, we still need to find Jenkins. If he did this to a Jaguar, he might be doing it to other animals too. You're right. Jim, do you know where his ranch is? Yeah, I do. It's Big Sky Ranch, about 12 miles from here. But he might not be there. Let's find out. Samantha knew confronting Jenkins alone would be dangerous, so she decided to contact Inspector Richard Thompson to accompany them. An hour later, they were on their way to the ranch in 2 pickup trucks. Big Sky Ranch was a large property, with pastures stretching as far as the eye could see. The main house sat atop a small hill surrounded by leafy trees. When they arrived, they were greeted by a tall, tanned man in his 50s who introduced himself as the ranch foreman. Mr. Jenkins isn't here, he said. He left a few days ago and didn't say when he'd be back. Where did he go? The inspector asked. I couldn't say. Samantha studied the foreman's demeanor. He seemed genuinely uninformed, but there was something in his expression that suggested unease. Can I ask you something? She said. Have you had any trouble with wild animals on the ranch lately? The foreman glanced around nervously. Look, ma'am, I'm not sure I should talk about that. Please, Samantha insisted. It's really important. Mr. Jenkins was real worried about jaguars attacking the cattle, lost 3 head just last month, and what was he planning to do about it? Don't know, but he was talking to some strange men, outsiders, said they had a solution to the problem. Samantha and the inspector exchanged glances. What kind of solution? Don't know, but after those talks, he got even more worked up, said he'd found a way to settle it all at once. And when was that? About a month ago, right around the time that Jaguar was rescued on the road. One last question, the inspector said. Do you know if Mr. Jenkins has any other business besides the ranch? Don't know a thing, sir. I just work with the cattle. On the way back, Samantha and the inspector discussed the possibilities. I suspect the Jaguar's rescue wasn't an accident, Samantha said. Someone may have hurt her on purpose so she'd be taken to our reserve. For what reason? To keep her under control. Maybe they wanted to use her for some kind of demonstration or test. What kind of test? I don't know. But if Jenkins was talking to outsiders about solutions for Jaguar problems, they might have planned to use our Jaguar as a test subject. When they got back to the reserve, Samantha went straight to check on the Jaguar. She was awake and alert, much better than that morning. The cub was still by her side, now playing with small twigs Samantha had left for him. "How is she?" Michael asked. "Improving, but it'll still take time." Samantha sat on the ground beside the animals and thought over everything she'd learned. There were still many unanswered questions, but at least now she knew she hadn't failed in her professional duties. "Michael," she said, "do you think Jenkins will come back?" "Hard to say. If he found out we discovered the scheme, he'll probably stay away for a while. Or he might try to get the Jaguar back somehow." "Samantha, do you think we're safe here?" "I don't know, but I won't let them take the Jaguar and her cub again." That night, Samantha decided to take watch duty at the storage facility again. She wanted to make sure nothing happened to the animals while they were vulnerable. Around midnight, the cub started behaving strangely once more. It was restless, pacing back and forth and sniffing the air intently. "What's wrong now, little one?" Samantha listened carefully. There were noises outside, as if someone was walking through the reserve's yard. She turned off the facility's light and peeked through the small window. In the dark, she could see shadows moving between the enclosures. "Oh my God," she whispered, grabbing her phone to call Michael. But before she could dial, the storage door burst open violently. Two men walked in, shining powerful flashlights that blinded her momentarily. "Dr. Samantha Miller?" one of them asked. "Who wants to know?" "We're from the security company hired by Mr. Jenkins. We're here to take the Jaguar." "What company? Show me your documentation." "We don't have time for paperwork. The Jaguar comes with us now." Samantha stepped between the men and the animals. "You're not taking them anywhere. This Jaguar is under medical care and can't be moved." "Ma'am, step aside, or we'll have to use other methods." The cub let out a low growl, a sound Samantha had never heard it make before. The mother Jaguar, though still weak, slowly rose and positioned herself protectively. "Look at that," one of the men laughed. "The feline family wants a fight." Samantha was terrified but couldn't show it. She knew if she let them take the animals, she'd probably never see them again. "Michael!" she shouted as loud as she could. "Help! Quiet!" One of the men lunged toward her. Just then, the mother Jaguar, despite her weakened state, leapt protectively at the man, snarling loudly. The man stumbled back, startled. "She's protecting the vet," the other man muttered. This wasn't part of the plan. Samantha used the confusion to run for the door, but one of the men grabbed her arm. "You're not going anywhere." At that moment, lights flooded the reserve and voices shouted from outside, "Police! Come out with your hands up!" The two men exchanged glances, clearly not expecting this. "How did the police know?" one asked. "Someone must have seen us," the other replied. Samantha didn't understand how the police had arrived, but she was deeply relieved. The men released her and tried to escape through the back window, but officers quickly surrounded them. "Dr. Samantha," Michael appeared at the door, accompanied by Inspector Richard Thompson. "Are you all right? How did you know?" "Jim was keeping watch on the other side of the reserve," Michael explained. "When he saw the men enter, he called the police and us immediately." Samantha turned to the animals. The Jaguar had lain down again, clearly exhausted from the effort, but the cub remained alert, watching everything around it. "Thank you," she whispered to the Jaguar. "You protected me even while sick." During the interrogation, the two men revealed crucial information. They worked for a private wildlife control company hired by local ranchers. The scheme involved capturing problem jaguars and selling them to private zoos or collectors. Jenkins had discovered the reserve had a healthy jaguar and devised a plan to injure the animal, have it rescued, and then remove it from the facility when security was low. "The plan was to use the jaguar as bait to capture other big cats in the region," explained one of the men. "Jaguars are territorial animals. With her in captivity, we could lure others into traps." Samantha felt sick imagining how many animals might have been harmed by this scheme. "And Mr. Jenkins?" Where is he? He fled when he heard the operation had failed. He's probably in another state by now. In the following days, the story spread across the region. The reserve received support from the local community and donations to improve facility security. The Jaguar gradually recovered. After 2 weeks of intensive care, she was strong enough to be moved to a larger, more comfortable enclosure. The cub grew quickly and became increasingly independent, though it still showed a special affection for Samantha. "I don't think he'll ever forget that you saved his mother," Michael said one day watching the cub play. "Actually," Samantha replied, "he's the one who saved his mother, and he saved me too." 3 months later, when the Jaguar had fully recovered, it was time to decide the animal's future. Ideally, they would be released back into the wild, but the cub had grown up too close to humans. There was a risk he wouldn't adapt to life in the wild. "What if we built a semi-wild enclosure here at the reserve?" Samantha suggested. "They'd have the freedom to hunt and behave naturally, but still be protected from hunters and ranchers." "It would be expensive," Michael said, "but it'd be the perfect solution for them." The proposal was approved by the State Environmental Protection Agency, and construction of the new enclosure began a few weeks later. It was a 5-acre area, fenced with high mesh, featuring native vegetation, a small stream, and several climbing trees. On transfer day, Samantha was emotional and anxious. It would be the first time she'd truly let the animals be free since the rescue. When she opened the gate, the mother Jaguar stepped out slowly, sniffing the air and exploring the new territory. The cub followed but kept stopping to look back at Samantha. "Go on," she whispered. "You're home now." After a few hours, the animals seemed to have adjusted well. The Jaguar found a shaded spot to rest, and the cub explored every corner of the enclosure. But at the end of the day, as Samantha prepared to leave, something touching happened. The cub ran to the fence and stood still, staring right at her. Then, for the first time since growing up, he meowed, not the desperate cry of his younger days, but a soft sound, almost like a greeting. Samantha approached the fence and held out her hand. The cub, now nearly the size of a large house cat, came close and pressed his nose against her palm through the mesh. "Thank you," Samantha said, tears in her eyes, "for teaching me that sometimes we need to listen to what animals are trying to tell us." 6 months later, the mother Jaguar had a new litter, 2 healthy cubs who grew up free in the semi-wild enclosure. The first cub, whom Samantha had affectionately nicknamed Little Teacher, became a protective older sibling, helping his mother teach the new cubs to hunt and survive. The reserve became a model for conservation in the region, drawing visitors from nearby towns to learn about big cat protection. Samantha never doubted her calling again. She had learned that sometimes saving animals wasn't just about healing physical wounds, it was about listening to what they were trying to say. Jim was pardoned by the environmental authorities, considering his family circumstances and his cooperation in the investigation. He secured the money for his daughter's surgery through a fundraising campaign organized by the local community. Jenkins was found 2 years later in another state and convicted of crimes against wildlife. The control company he had hired was also dismantled, and every day, when Samantha made her rounds through the reserve, she would stop in front of the big cat enclosure. Little Teacher always came to greet her at the fence, pressing his nose against the mesh, as if thanking her once again for listening to his plea for help on that distant day. Sometimes, as she watched the family of jaguars playing freely in their enclosure, Samantha reflected on how her life had changed since that morning when a small, lost cub had decided to follow her down the dirt road. She had learned that communication between humans and animals went far beyond words. All it took was patience, observation, and most importantly, an open heart to understand what they needed to say. The reserve flourished, becoming a regional leader in big cat rehabilitation, and Samantha achieved her dream of dedicating her entire life to protecting wild animals. But of all her accomplishments and successes, nothing compared to the magical moment at the end of each day, when Little Teacher would run to the fence to say hello to the woman who had heard his cry for help and saved his family. In those moments, Samantha knew she had found her true purpose in life, to be the voice for those who couldn't speak, but had so much to say to those who knew how to listen. The end of the story. And what about you, dear listener? What did you think of this touching story? Could you imagine how heartbreaking it must have been for Samantha to uncover the truth behind the Jaguar's disappearance? Share your thoughts in the comments about her dedication and whether you believe animals can truly communicate with us in ways we might not expect. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming stories.